Brandon. Welcome to my channel, Books in the Shire. I've been seeing a lot of videos about 2020 books I want to read in 2022, and I really liked that idea, so I thought I would jump on the train and do it as well. I've come up with 22 books that I want to try and prioritize reading in 2022. Most of them are books I already own. Not a lot of them are new releases because one of my goals for the upcoming year is to prioritize the books I own on my shelf. So I think I only have about 4 books that will be new releases in 2022, but everything else is books that I already own, they're backlist, and yeah, I just want to read them because they've been on my shelves for a while. So these books aren't going to be in any particular order. I just kind of pulled them off my shelf and I'm just going to talk about the ones that I want to read. The first book I have on this list is Strange the Dreamer by Laini Taylor. I've had this book on my shelf for I think 3 or so years now, and I still haven't gotten to it. I know everyone loves this book. It's like a YA staple, but I just haven't picked it up. I don't know. I keep prioritizing new releases, which is really bad, but I know everyone says that the writing is really lyrical, and if you're not into that, you probably won't like the book. And honestly, I don't know if I'm into that or not. So we're gonna see. The next book I have is another YA staple that everyone seems to enjoy, and that is Scythe by Neil Shusterman, sorry. But similar to Strange the Dreamer, I've had this on my shelf for probably 3 or 4 years now, and I still haven't read it. I actually have read the first chapter of this, and I was intrigued, but then I put it down. I don't remember why. That was probably right around the time I had bought it. I've heard really good things about this series. I have heard that The Toll, which is the last book, is not as good, but I'm still going to be open-minded if I do enjoy this and keep going with the series. The next book I have is one that hasn't been on my shelf for too long, but it's been on my want to read list for since it came out basically, and that is Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo. This is, I think, an adult dark academia fantasy book. I don't really know much about it, other than it takes place at Yale, Yale, and stuff happens. I've heard mixed things. After the hype died down for this book, a lot of people were like, yeah, it's an average book, or I didn't like it at all. So I am a little wary of it now that the hype has died down and more people are kind of discussing their thoughts, but it's still something that sounds intriguing to me, so it's definitely something I want to try and prioritize. Next is a middle grade that I bought right when it came out, and then I just never read it because I'm trash and I forget. That is Amari and the Night Brothers by B.B. Alston. This is about a girl who I think is trying to figure out what happened to her brother. Yeah, her brother went missing. She's trying to figure out what happened. And I've just heard really good things about this. I really love the cover too. It's stunning, and I know that shouldn't make me want to read the book anymore, but it does. And it sounds like it'll kind of be a dark middle grade, which I like. So I'm really intrigued to read this next year. So you'll notice probably a trend with a lot of the YA books I have on this list are they're older YA staples, because I didn't really start reading again. I used to read as a kid, but I didn't start reading again until about 2018. So I missed a lot of the early phase stuff. And so I'm trying to play catch up. So the next I have is Legend by Marie Lu. I read Warcross and Wildcard by Marie Lu, and I really love those. And then I also read Sky Hunter, and that was kind of it wasn't a bad book, but it didn't hit for me. I gave it 3 stars. So I'm really intrigued to see what her older stuff is like, because everyone seems to love this series, and I'm not afraid to still read dystopian. I actually really like dystopian if it's done right, so I'm intrigued to pick this up and see what happens. Are we surprised? Yet another old YA staple, and that is Air of Fire by Sarah J. Maas. I read the first 2 books in the Throne of Glass series this year, 2021, and I want to continue with that series. I am scared though, because this book is 600 pages, and that scares me. These books, luckily, despite it being a long book, I think they're really quick reads, so I think this will be, despite it being 600 pages, I think I'll be able to get through it quickly because they read really fast. There's nothing that's crazy long-winded or extra descriptive that'll slow down my reading. It's pretty fast paced, and I've already read the first 2 books. The world's pretty established, so I'm excited for this one. Next I have Goddess in the Machine by Laura Beth Johnson. This is a YA, I almost said fantasy, it's a sci-fi, and all I know about it is our main character is she awakens from a really long sleep or something, and the world that she awakens to thinks that she is a god. And that sounds really interesting. I've heard really good things about this. A booktuber I really like, This Story Ain't Over, she loved this book, and I think her and I have pretty similar reading tastes, so I think I'm gonna enjoy it as well. One book that I want to read this year that is a new release is Gallant by V.E. Schwab. This is I believe it's a YA fantasy. I don't really know much about it, but it sounds really interesting, and I really like V. Schwab's adult books, so I'm hoping I like this book as well. The next book I have is a really popular adult book that everyone's been raving about for the past year or two, and that is The Poppy War by R.F. Kuang. I literally just got this book for Christmas, and I am so ready to dive in because this just sounds so epic, but it sounds like it's something that is really attainable for people to read because it's not a very long book, at least this first one. It's only about 500 something pages. And I feel like as someone who hasn't read a lot of adult, it seems quite attainable for me to read. I've heard it's dark, gritty, and it's all about war, and so I wouldn't expect anything less. So I'm excited to kind of broaden my horizon with this book. The next book is a book that I started in 2021. I got about a third of the way through, and I was really enjoying it, but every time I picked it up, it was hard for me to read more than I would say 30 or so pages at a time, and I'm not sure why. Maybe it just wasn't the right time for me to read. But that is Lore by Alexandra Bracken. I was actually really enjoying this, but like I said, every time I picked it up, I was having trouble focusing on it, and that could be because there's it's maybe a lot info dumpy, which is hard for me to keep up with at certain points, but I think it just wasn't meshing with me at the time, so I really want to actually pick it up and give it a proper chance this year. Wow, 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 we have another YA staple, and that is Scarlet by Marissa Meyer. I literally just read Cinder maybe a couple of weeks ago, and I really liked it. I didn't think I would, but I actually really enjoyed it. So I want to keep going with the series and read it, and I think I'm going to crank this out really soon because I'm actually really excited to keep going with the series and see where it goes. The next book I have is a adult book. I think that it came out in 2021. I'm not totally sure. Either 2021 or 2022, or either 2021 or 2020 is when it came out, but that is The Library of the Dead by T.L. Huchu. I'm so sorry. T.L. Huchu. I think I'm butchering that. Honestly, I can't tell you off the top of my head what this is about, but every time I read the synopsis, I'm like, oh my god, I need to read it now. And so I don't know why I keep waiting. I just got it, so that's kind of why I was waiting. But this is definitely a top priority for this upcoming year because I really, really, really want to read it. Every time I think about this book, I'm like, oh, I just need to start it. So another book that I don't own that I want to read next year is The Atlas Six by Olive E. Blake. It was independently published, I believe, previously, but now it's actually being published by a publishing house, so I definitely want to read that once it comes out. I've heard really good things. I've also heard some mixed things, so I am a little hesitant, but I'm definitely intrigued by the premise and think I'm going to really enjoy it. The next book on my list is The Bone Season by Samantha Shannon. This is another adult fantasy novel. So our main character is a clairvoyant, and she's taken to this place to be able to basically be tested on, from what I understand from the synopsis. I've heard really good things about this, and again, I think it's another adult book that would be an easy transition from YA to adult for me, but based off of what I've heard, I think a lot of people who do read a lot of YA have read this and enjoyed it as well. Next, I have The Gilded Wolves by Roshni Chokshi. I have trouble saying that. Chokshi, I think is how you say it. But this is a YA fantasy, I believe. I believe it's set in Paris in the 1800s, and I think there's a heist in the book. But again, I've heard really good things about it, and I know the last book just recently came out, so if it is a series I start and enjoy, at least the series is finished so I can finish the series without waiting for another book. The next book I have can kind of vary on age category. I think it's classified as middle grade, but I would classify it as young adult. I think it's only middle grade solely because the main protagonist is young, but that is Inkspell by Cornelia Funke. This is the second book in the Inkheart series. Inkheart is one of my favorite childhood books. I have reread it several times and it's always a 5 stars. It never loses that magic for me, but I never read the whole series. But it's just such a good story, the first one, so I'm really looking forward to reading the second one and hoping it's transports me the same way the first one does. Another new release that I want to read this year is From Bad to Cursed by Lana Harper. That is the second book in the Witches of Thistle Grove series, I believe. I read Payback's a Witch this year and loved it. I gave it 5 stars. It was so good. There were definitely elements that weren't my favorite, but as a whole, I just really enjoyed the story. So I'm excited for this second book, because the second book too, so they're romance books. The second book follows a character you've already been introduced to, but she wasn't the main character in the first book, so I'm excited to see like the connections, because I love the world the author made, but this time we're following a different character and it's a whole new story, and I'm really looking forward to that. The next book I have is The Invisible Library by Genevieve Cogman. This is an adult novel, adult fantasy, and I'm pretty sure it's basically about, it's kind of like a heist story where they're trying to steal like a rare book. I haven't seen a lot of people talk about this, at least on like BookTube or Bookstagram. I think it's very much adult book a lot of people haven't read that are in these communities, or if they have, they just don't talk about it. But it always catches my eye. Every time I would go to Barnes & Noble, I would see it and I'm like, I want to read that book. I just like never, you know, bought it, and then I finally did one day, and now I'm like, well, now that I have it, I have to read it. So I'm putting it on this list because I want to read it next year. The next book I have is one that I again started in 2021 but did not finish. I got probably about a third into it as well. Same with Lore. I was really enjoying it. I just don't know why I never finished. That is A Torch Against the Night by Sabaa Tahir. This is the second book in An Ember in the Ashes series. I enjoyed An Ember in the Ashes. It definitely wasn't what I was expecting, so I gave it 3 stars, but I think upon reflection, it would probably be 4 stars. It was actually really well done. And what I've read of A Torch Against the Night, I'm really enjoying so far. So far, it's a 4-star read. But like I said, I'm only like a third in. I'm gonna have to restart it though, because I kind of don't remember what happened. I already started it, so I'm like, why am I not finishing it? This is definitely a priority. Okay, I only have a few more books to go. The next book I have is The Battle of the Labyrinth by Rick Riordan. I know, I haven't read all the Percy Jackson books. I'm bad, but like I said, I only got back into reading a couple of years ago, so I've been making my way through. This is the 4th book, so I'm getting there, only 2 left. I don't hold the same nostalgia, obviously, everyone else does, but I do understand why everyone loves them. They are really fun books. So yeah, definitely want to try and prioritize finishing this series this year because I am behind. Next, I have an adult book that I think a lot of people have read and a lot of people love, and that is The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern. This is an adult fantasy standalone, and I've just heard really incredible things about it. I haven't read it yet, so I would like to. It's also been on my shelf for probably a year or two, because once I started getting back into reading and doing BookTube and Bookstagram, everyone was always raving about this book, so I was like, oh, I should probably read that. So I bought it, and I still haven't read it. Last but not least, the final book on this list is Witches Steeped in Gold by Sienna Smart. This was probably one of my most anticipated releases for 2021. It just sounds so good, and I don't know much about it other than it is YA witches, and I'm pretty sure they're like 2 sisters or like cousins or something, and they have to like battle it out. I like drama, so I'm excited for this. But definitely this is, since it was one of my most anticipated releases of 2021, I would like to try and prioritize it for 2022 because I think I really am going to love it, and the next book I think comes out in 2022. So if I read this, then I can read the next book right off the bat. Win-win. Those are the 22 books that I want to read in 2022. Obviously it's not a set in stone TBR. I don't follow TBRs, but I would ideally like to prioritize those 22 books, especially the ones that I already own that are on my shelf. But maybe I'll do an updated video at the end of 2022 to see how many of these books I actually read. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this, please like and subscribe. Also let me know some of the books you're looking forward to reading in 2022, whether they be new releases or backlist.